Hello, everybody. Welcome to Keys to ESP. This is episode 2. Welcome to our podcast about Keyforge, the card game. Once again, this is John. I am here joined by the Canadian Grand Championships top 4, Benson.
Hello.
We have Ottawa top 4, Dennis.
Hey.
And we got Albany Vault Tour top 32, Josh.
Hello.
So this has been a week since our last recording. We've been playing a bit more Keyforge, or at least some of us have been doing that. So how have you guys been so far today, guys? Or at least for this past week?
Pretty good. Craving some deck openings. Hopefully I can get a hold of some. So I really want to open decks.
Nice. Is there like a shortage or something?
Our LGS is just not ordering anything because of the pandemic.
Oh man, all right, that sucks. Hopefully you get more stock in then. All right, so how about Josh? Have you been doing any Keyforge playing or anything like that?
Yeah, I actually got on the TCO. It's been about 2-3 months since I started playing. For those that don't know, it's the Crucible Online. It's like it's a software that you can play on the browser for Keyforge, and I played like what arguably was my best deck, and I accidentally played it on casual, and some people got pretty mad. But it's all good. I won. But apart from that, I've been making YouTube videos. So I've been posting regularly, I think every 2-3 days or so. I'm just gonna plug myself right now. Joe Dobby KF, JODOBBI KF. And that's mainly what I've been doing, not necessarily playing.
So if anybody on TCO or sees you, they'll find you, and on YouTube they'll go ahead and get more content from you, huh?
Yeah, man. Circle of life.
All right, how about you, Benson? Have you been doing anything on Keyforge related for the past week?
The only thing has been the reps DC trades that I got in from last Tuesday. But otherwise, it's been a slow week on Keyforge. So just like Joe Dobby, I'm working on a few things in the back end. Nothing to plug myself yet, but hopefully in the works. And yeah, but hopefully with this discussion, it's just this is my Keyforge time now.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, if you guys haven't heard, there was apparently a Crucible cast that came out. I think last week or so? Yeah, actually last week. And a lot of people didn't hear about it till a few days after. It was on the UK, one of those UK gaming expo kind of things, where they had FFG developers and such go on and do a Crucible cast. If people don't know what a Crucible cast is, it's actually the publisher, Fantasy Flight Games, and their organized play and the developers. They have like a once a month, or I want to say once a month, once every 2 months, they have a little chat or a little bit of an official discussion on YouTube generally, where they discuss some news, recent news, or like organized play happenings. And we haven't had one in a while, but it was a surprise that we got a Crucible cast. And then it wasn't really published until actually this week, where on the Fantasy Flight YouTube channel. Have you guys heard anything about that at all?
The only thing I heard is just online when people posted it. They said, "Oh, look at this hidden Crucible cast," which is normally I am subscribed to their YouTube channel, the Fantasy Flight Games, and I didn't see it being published until 2 days ago. Not gonna lie, I didn't watch it though, but I don't know what they talk about.
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in Keyforge and the developments of Keyforge, you're not really missing a whole lot. This episode, they mainly talked about kind of what they were doing, what the developers were doing, and their hobbies, and in terms of how they develop the game, different cards and different mechanics for Keyforge. So, I mean, if you're looking for news on the game that affects it, the meta and such like that, you're not missing a whole lot. But if you're interested in the actual developers and what they get to do or what they do on the side and get how they get inspiration for the game. It's okay. It's a little interesting. It's pretty cool. And as for organized play, it's kind of the same old where a lot of countries aren't opened, or don't have organized play at this point in time, and the ones that do, they're basically reverting back to the stores themselves, um, and asking the players, to basically reach out to their local store to see what's happening. So not a whole lot, not a whole lot, but that is something that's happening in the Keyforge world. And it's an interesting development. Hopefully we get more news from them soon. So on to the main topic for this episode. One thing we're going to be talking about is deck evaluations. I wanted to see and pick each person's mind here, in terms of how they play, some play styles, and possibly go into the way they each of us think and how we approach the game when either in store or even online, when we play a game. So first off, I just want to, inquire about, play style. So if you ever heard about this, there's different people play differently. And for sure, for myself, I like doing playing a game where it's a little more cautious, a little more conservative, but also something that would be more disruptive to the opponent, which is kind of fun because then you make people not sure what's going to happen, and then when you do hit them, then they realize like, oh my gosh, what do I need to do? Keeps them on their toes. So for me, if you think about the house Dis, that's kind of one of my faves, and that fits into my play style. Of course, other houses too, but just disruption, and just kind of messing around with people. How about you, Josh? What's your play style like?
My play style is fairly simple. I like being able to take control of the board. And when you think of taking control of the board, your initial thought is, yeah, having more creatures than your opponent. But I like decks that have a lot of creature control, at least one board wipe, a bunch of spot removal. I do love having key creatures. For example, like Hysteria, controlling the board with 2 snags is the way to go for me. Those are the types of cards and synergies that I would look for.
So
Um,
quick
yeah,
thing. What's Hysteria and what's Snag? Just so our listeners have an idea of what type of
of
play like.
course. Yes. So Hysteria is an action card that allows you, well, when you play it, all creatures on the board actually go back to their owner's hands. And Snag is I believe, a 5 power creature from Dis that its fight effect is that the opponent must choose the active house of the creature it fought. So it's very controlling in a sense that you play the Hysteria, you bring the snags down, they drop some creatures from one house, and then you take them out. So essentially, sorry, I'm rambling, but long story short, what I'm going for is creature control, ember control, and a decent amount of generation from raw ember pips. I don't necessarily like to reap much. I find that creatures are meant to fight unless they have a strong reap effect. I'm the opposite player.
Okay, cool. How about you, Dennis? What's your type of play style that you enjoy?
I feel like if it stayed from set 1 all the way to set 4, set 4 kind of changed it up a lot, but the overall effect is either it's some sort of control. It's either control of the amber, which is what everybody loves. Not everybody, but a lot of people loves. Like, let's say your shadows houses. The secondary type that I like is these, as John mentioned before, either disrupting your opponent, let's say playing creatures that have passive effects. Let's say Succubus, which is a 3 power creature from this that allow that if it stays on the board for 1 turn, your opponent draws 1 less card. Or Ember Imp, which is your opponent is only allowed to play 2 cards. Stuff like that, some sort of control, just so that they can not run the deck, play the deck that it's meant to run. Or the main type that I like is definitely Amber Control, which is like you're stealing some form of stealing from shadows. Which is like, let's say your Urchin, which is a creature with play steal 1, or like the biggest one, the card that I really love is Too Much to Protect, which is steal all of your opponent's amber but 6. And then you follow it up with something else so that your opponent doesn't forge a key by taking them down to 5. Something like that.
Okay. Cool. So we got a bit of creature control, we got a bit of stealing. How about you, Benson? Where's your where do you come from? Or where do you usually, I guess, go towards with Keyforge?
Well, just like with Dennis, my playstyle kind of stayed consistent since Coda, or Call of the Archon's first set. Um, it's the first card game I officially learned and got more competitive into, so that playstyle kind of built off that foundation where it was a race. First to 6 amber to try to challenge for a key, and then first to 3 keys, right? So that's at the heart of Keyforge, that's what it is. And my playstyle just revolved around that. So Coda, we all know that it was a lot of lots of amber generation, a little bit of key cheating, and a lot of speed out of logos, depending on if you got the right cards. So um, I kept those aspects in terms of my playstyle overall, and it had to evolve with different sets being introduced and different components not being where I would have wanted it to be as new sets were introduced, and each house had different flavor. But kind of tying in with my favorite houses, I guess at the top, the commonality is Untamed. We know it in Coda to be the Amber Rush house, and it's kind of changed the shape a bit over the different sets, but it's been one of the houses that my main decks that I use to play competitively has always included. So I'm all about speed, getting through cards, getting to the cards that I really need, because I did have a deck back during the Grand Championships. Actually, the last deck that I played with, it was slow, but it had a lot of tools. But then I came across a super fast rush deck, and I didn't have the answers when I needed it. So that feeling kind of stuck with me and also impacted my playstyle as well. And now it's just feeling the feeling of being able to go through my deck quickly, pick up the pieces I need, maybe having some archiving and whatnot so I can put it away, stash it for when it's going to really come in handy. Like Too Much to Protect, for example, or Interdimensional Graft. Something that stops somebody that's rushing really high is one example, or maybe a board wipe, or so on and so forth. Like there's multiple examples, right? Um, but there are other components that I definitely like to introduce. But at the end of the day, it's about speed and it's about taking initiative. It's about putting things on the board that the opponent needs to challenge, and I think that is a common trend between all of us, where we want to make our opponent answer to what we're doing, and then we take initiative, we lead the game, kind of thing. So I think, yeah, like it's a different shape, but I think at the end of the day, it does a very similar thing. So yeah, I just noticed that after. Luckily, I was last to go, so I got to hear some of what you guys had to say, and I picked up on that.
Yeah, I mean that makes kind of sense in terms of if you do go fast enough, you're basically controlling the pace of the game itself, right?
Yeah,
Like holistically, you're forcing the opponent to have to respond to you getting closer to the win condition, which is
exactly.
in itself a form of control in a sense as well.
That's right.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, so I mean, it seems like at least for Dennis and Benson, you guys state a lot of you guys mentioned Coda or the first set and saying how that kind of carried you guys through in terms of your play style from the very first set. With the new sets though, as sets came out, has your play style changed at all? Did you maybe stray away from the specific house you did mention, Untamed for Benson and then Shadows for Dennis? Like with the new sets, has any of the new houses perhaps like kind of made you kind of switch over or cause some worry for you at all or anything like that?
Yeah. So as I was mentioning with the different sets being introduced and how each house kind of had a different flavor. So first set, the Untamed Wash was undeniable, like one of the fastest ones. Second set, we hardly saw anything, but I think Sanctum at the time was maybe a bit more like an Amber generator, with like free markets where you play it, and depending on how many houses are represented on the board, I believe with any card, artifacts, or creatures, you can get an amber for each house represented. So like that's an
And
immediate
that's
burst.
a second set card though.
Right. Yeah. It was introduced in the second set. I believe it's in the fourth set right now as well.
Yeah, when second come back. Yep.
Exactly. Third set, actually don't really remember which house generated the most. I believe it would have been Saurians overall. It's just a different format it came in as. Rather than Amber in your pool, it was Amber on the board. So again, like so
a new Exalt mechanic that came out, right?
Exactly. So to your question, yeah, for sure the houses I used kind of changed to adapt to that playstyle. But at the same time, the playstyle evolved a little bit as the meta shifted within each set. So, like first set, we didn't care about the board. Who cares about board wipes? Who cares about whatever? Your reversal deck is a deck that has too many wipes that gave you chains, with a huge board but nothing else, because that didn't work against other Coda decks that were fast. But now it's very different. You need all those pieces. So yeah, like some of the decks that are rated really highly for my collection did exactly what Coda does, but as the meta stands now, I wouldn't use it competitively because it doesn't have all the tools it needs. So yeah, definitely both adapting from my playstyle to the current meta, as well as changing the house or using the different house that suits my playstyle more, has happened throughout all sets.
Okay. So mainly, so at the end of the day, you still kind of stuck with Untamed as kind of like your way to gain the speed and to force the win. Is that it? Is that correct?
Yep. Other than the second set, I think overall that's been true. Third set's a little finicky too with the Untamed. It was kind of shifted more towards Saurians, but overall, yeah, like this set right now, set 4, Untamed's kind of back exactly how I like it. So it's definitely one of the houses that I would include in my main competitive deck.
Awesome. So Key Frog is in your pocket.
I hope so. Ideally with 2 damage pips, right? Because that's the best one.
Yep. So how about you, Dennis? You said that, from set 1, you were kind of the go-to with Shadows. That was your main playstyle and fit into your playstyle. So has any of them changed at all? Shadows has been one of the houses as well with an Untamed, where it has been in all 4 sets. But has any of the other houses kind of piqued your interest or kind of changed the way you needed to play?
Definitely. I would say from set 1 to set 3, Shadows literally stayed the same. Different cards, but it did the exact same thing. Whether it's 2 different forms of stealing, either pity steal 1 at a time, or steal big. First 3 sets. But as 4th set got introduced, the Amber control, especially my playstyle, literally changed a lot. The Amber control, we're probably going to get into this in future episodes, but the Amber control is a lot more board-based. Even in Shadows, I would say, Amber control became more board-based. A lot in the 4th set is the steals are like very dinky, meaning that it's 1 at a time, or like there's a big trade-off, like let's say Ransack. Steal 1, and then keep discarding the top of your deck until and repeat it if it's a Shadows card again. So you steal again. So there's a trade-off, but the first 3 sets literally play a Shadows card, you automatically steal. So it's a very big shift for me. Not gonna lie, a lot of my decks transcends the first 3 sets, but the 4th set really takes it down.
Yeah, but okay, so I just have a question though, because for me on the third set, though, on the 3rd set there is one of my favorite 3rd set cards from Logos House, the Upgrade Discombobulator. It's back in the 4th set as well, where it just straight up denies stealing from the opponent. Like, how did you, like, for me, I have a deck that has 2 of them, and it's done pretty well for me, and it shuts down stealing right away, of course, unless you can get rid of the creature. But like, how do you, like, it feels like there's a lot of different steal hate coming up, at least for the last 2 sets. Like, has that worried you at all, or are you just kind of like going full force into the whole stealing still?
It's worried me quite a lot actually, because one of my best decks, I'm sure you guys know where it is. Um, if you have at least one or two hate like steal hate, I wouldn't say it's dead, but I need to find a way to respond to it. Example, let's say Odorak comes out, Saurian card, capture one. If it has an amber, can't steal. So I needed to find a way to get rid of that card, and so waste a turn, essentially waste a turn, so that I can set up for a steal. There's a lot more steal hate, which means it's pushing the meta is pushing shadows out. I would say I could be wrong, but definitely shadows has changed a lot from set 1, 2, 3 into the fourth set. So my playstyle, I need to shift it a bit. Still haven't found a new playstyle, I guess, that shifts all 4 sets. But the first 3 sets I'm fine with. The fourth set, I need to invest a little bit more time and a little bit more money into it. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, with the pandemic and not having a lot of tournaments and such, to actually being able to test out different decks against each other in a real time setting, I think it's a little difficult to identify a shift in playstyle, if anything. Hopefully, we'll be able to get more into those situations where we can pit houses against each other, for sure. So how about you, Josh? In terms of, you said you do like the board control, and both Benson and Dennis did mention, the first set didn't really have a whole lot. It was more like rush, steal, kind of just mess with things. I guess for you, where do you find board control coming in any particular set? Or is it still here currently, or is it strong? Like, what are your thoughts in terms of how over the course of the 4 sets, board control has played a factor, if any?
Honestly, I think, board control as a win con, as a winning factor, has actually grown exponentially, in my opinion.
All right,
I started,
exponentially, all right.
yeah, I started off with Age of Ascension, and there wasn't a lot of building your board as much as there is now in Worlds Collide and Mass Mutation. There's so much you can do with your board too. There's so much you can do with Captured Ember, moving it to your own pool, for instance, taking it to common supply. There's ways to almost have like this pseudo steal where you're transferring Ember, like I said, from creatures to your own pool. And both Worlds Collide and Mass Mutation have just kind of strengthened my kind of philosophy of being able to control the board, whether you are destroying your opponent's creatures through playing removal cards, or building your own momentum on your side by playing your own creatures. My experience with Coda, because I started with AOA onwards, is, I think it's very simplified as a set, and I didn't find it fun, and most of the games I play for fun. And that's why board control, I'm really glad at where it's going, and I'm really glad at, at what I'm currently seeing with Dark Tidings. But that'll be another conversation to have. But yeah, I'm just, all I gotta say is I think we're heading in the right direction.
So, are you more a proponent for big dudes on the board, like those 12 powered, 14 powered creatures, 20 powered creatures on the board, or are you more of like the elusive kind of dudes where they kind of make it a little more difficult to remove, kind of thing? Like, what's your swing?
So yeah, Shadow's my favorite house thematically because of all the rogues, assassins, elusiveness, skirmish, and the steal,
Hmm.
being deceptive and all that. But I think what I love right now is house cheating. I love being able to manipulate multiple creatures in the same turn that belong to different houses. Cards like, for example, Subject Kirby, which is a play fight reap Starlines creature that allows me to play creatures of other houses, setting myself up for that dis turn. For example, if I played dis creatures that turn, right? The speed is in my ability, or the ability of a deck that I would like to manipulate as many components of the board as possible, whether it's artifacts or creatures, all in the same time.
Okay. Cool. I mean, yeah, in terms of being able to do that, I guess Skippy Time Hog is your favorite card then, right? You'd love to see a Skippy Time Hog on the other side of the board being dropped on you. Skippy Time Hog is a 1-power creature. When you play it, the opponent is not able to use any cards on their following turn. Just for our listeners to know.
Yeah, exactly. It is a great weakness among other things, like my opponents having their own form of board control. But you know what? One Skippy Time Hog, I don't think is going to do a lot, unless you have it early in the game and you're able to drop it um, at a very well timed play.
That's true though.
Um,
It is a rare
yeah,
card, so you don't see it
yeah.
often.
You'll probably see just one of it. I've never seen a double Skippy Time Hog deck, and you have a 1 in 36 chance of being able to play that deck throughout the entire game. So I'll have a higher probability that I'll have a board by then.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, thanks for bringing that up in terms of in a tournament, you might only see a certain card once or something like that. Going into that, if we say go into a store, I want to know, like, what do you guys usually do now, knowing that your play styles? What do you guys usually do to figure out a deck, right? Say for a sealed environment, which is what a lot of us generally like to play. Um, Aside from Archon, so let's take Archon out of the picture right now. Just in a sealed environment, when we get to a store, if you open a brand new deck, how do you guys evaluate it? Like, definitely. So if those that are interested in playing organized play at a store, do note that outside materials are not allowed for evaluation of a deck. So, like our resources that we did mention briefly last episode about decks of Keyforge or other types of online resources or anything like that is not allowed. So I'm just curious, like, so what do you guys do in terms of just getting a fresh deck, opening it up? What do you guys look for? So I'll give you guys a couple minutes to think about it because I've thought about this a bit. And the general way I do things is I just crack open the pack. Of course, sleeve it first, but after that, I look for a really base count of how many amber pips are on the deck, just as a quick look. But more importantly for me, I look at how many creatures I have in the deck. Generally, the number that I'm hitting for average is 17 or so. If it hits that number, then if you're a little bit more on the board or a little bit less on the board. Count are. So basically, the creature count, artifacts card, action card count, and then upgrades is it's a good number. That's whatever's left over. And then on the side is also knowing how many pips I have. And from there on, I just mainly I just run with that, and hopefully I count for like one board control and maybe like one piece of artifact control if I have it or not. But those are the kind of sub criterias. So what do you guys do in terms of cracking open a deck, and how do you guys evaluate in a sealed environment?
I look for Odoak the Patrician. No, I'm kidding.
You look for one
That's
card.
not me.
No, so I'm gonna jump in while I have it in my mind. So when I actually crack open a deck, the first thing I look at is the name, because if it's a funny name, that means I'm gonna win it all. Secondly, I like to, like you said, first look at all the raw amber on the deck, and then figure out what this deck wants to do in terms of how many creatures I have, so its ability to reap, and its creature control once again. I feel like in a sealed environment, you work with what you have, right? And the only information that you have is really what's on the board. So being able to take care of your opponent's board in a sealed environment actually holds a bit more weight to it than in an Archon, where you're able to see whether creature control is all that important, right? So I look for creatures, a number of creatures that I would have, and then I look at the ways that I can either control my opponent's ability to generate through Ember control, or control my opponent's ability to gain momentum on the board through creature control. Those are the two main things. I don't really look for artifact control in sealed. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I actually think yeah, being able to control the board in terms, or at least knowing that you can hold control over the board in a sealed environment is pretty important. Just as you mentioned, for sure, like you don't really know what's gonna happen, but for sure, some form of a board should play out to a certain extent for in most games, if any. So that's a pretty good point.
I want to jump right on this just because you guys mentioned a lot of points that I wanted to go on top of it, I guess. You said that the way I evaluate decks is just, and I'm actually also glad the fact that you told us a format, just because a tournament or a game changes based on the format you're playing. So in sealed point, the first thing I look for is when I open a deck to see what house combo it has, because each house combo, at least in my opinion, has an archetype, meaning that this house combo is gonna run generally like this, or if it's let's say a rush example, as Benson mentioned, if it has an Untamed, it wants to generate, right? So for me, the first thing I look for is the house combo, and then before I even flip open the Archon card, I try to think is like, how am I gonna play this deck? Am I gonna play it slow? Am I gonna play it fast? Am I gonna try to take the board? Well, I don't know yet, so I'm just at least have a rough idea in my head. You guys also mentioned the fact that you count pips, you count creature cards, action cards, etc., etc. I do that as well. That's the first thing I definitely do to see whether or not I'm gonna rush, I'm gonna control the pace, or I'm gonna slow down, or I'm gonna set you up. The thing that when I'm on top of my game, not gonna lie, is I want to see that because I'm not always on top of my game, is try to play with the opponent as well, especially on a sealed environment. The thing I remembered when we played a sealed in set 2. Set 2 has a lot of combos. The one big combo there is the Brig, which is your Binate Rupture interdimensional graph combo. So for me, when I played Binate Rupture, which is Alpha, first card you have to play, you double the amount of Amber Pool in the opponent and in your pool. So I played that, and then I play XYZ Researcher, which is either archive the top card of your discard pile or top card of your deck. So I chose to archive Binate Rupture. Point is, I went another step thinking that my opponent, as you guys mentioned, whatever's on the board is the information you have. So I let my opponent think that I would have the Brig combo, which I didn't. So when I'm on top of my game, I try to play the set or the meta of the set, especially in sealed, because you don't know what's coming, as you guys mentioned. So that was one of the bigger things that I played during the set, but I actually did not have the combo. So my opponent in that game was just threatened the whole time. So I had control somewhat of the game, but I didn't have a control deck at that point.
Interesting. So what happens if you play a newer player who doesn't know the cards necessarily or the particular combos? You're just throwing things away, huh?
But the thing is, I wouldn't have played that if I knew my opponent didn't know that. Okay. My opponent at the time, I don't know, he was a pretty good player. I don't know if you remember who he was.
Okay, all right. So basically, as you mentioned, you're playing the player to a certain extent. So, but that's knowing that you know the person. But if you walked into a fresh environment with not knowing anybody, then I don't know if you want to be doing that, huh?
No, I would either take the chance of he thinks that, he or she thinks that, or I'm just gonna leave it alone.
Or even just bring up that possible combo. Be like, hey, you know this set? Like, hey, there's this combo, by the way. If I have these cards. I totally just lie out of your teeth.
Oh, man. I would not do that.
Hey, no one said you can't crosstalk while playing, right?
I can't do that. I'm messing with people's head.
All right. How about you, Benson? How do you, if you were in a sealed environment, Benson, how do you evaluate a deck, or are there any differences in terms of how you would evaluate a deck when you open up a fresh one?
I think everybody's already inputted like kind of the core components of what you need to look for in a deck just in general. But I'll say there's maybe like 2 or 3 levels of appraisal for a sealed environment. Step one is your own deck, right? Like getting to understand what your deck wants to do, what it can and can't do. So without going to the specifics that everybody else has already said, um, that's one part. The other part is understanding the meta of the set. Because usually for sealed, you're playing within a set. You're not. It's possible, but it's pretty rare that the store sets it up so you have different sets competing against each other. Especially when we've seen certain sets are objectively weaker than other sets. Not to say they don't have a chance, but they just are designed in a way that doesn't stack up to the current meta overall, spanning across all 4 sets. So yeah, I'm expecting something within a set. So therefore, the second stage is understanding what the meta is for the set, what decks within that meta is the strongest, and what your deck has that falls in that. And if I take it one step further, it's a knowledge of the card pool. So this is probably the third tier of depth that if you want to go this far, you could. And this will definitely add to your game in a sealed environment where each card is separated into common, uncommon, rare, special rare, right? So knowing the probabilities of a deck containing those cards, you can make an estimate by looking at your opponent's deck. Okay, these are the 3 houses. Sure, like when we look back in Coda, it was very straightforward. You look at a house, you're like, okay, this house wants to do this. Ideally speaking. So in a random draw for a sealed with only a solo deck might not matter as much because it's luck of the draw. Within a scenario where you have multiple chances at a deck that you can choose between 2 or 3 sealed decks to play with, now you're thinking, okay, they're going to choose a deck that probably that house within that set is going to perform the way it's supposed to perform. So within a Coda situation, it's very straightforward. Team's going to rush. Logos is going to give you a lot of speed, cycle through your deck. This is definitely going to disrupt, and there's a lot of things you're going to need to answer. So, like, all those pieces kind of put together gives you that view of what are you coming up against in this tournament, the seal tournament. So yeah, like how I look at the deck is exactly the same. Actually, unlike Joe Dobby or Josh. I probably never look at my name until like second or third round, and I'm like, oh hey, that name is actually pretty good. When my opponent tells me, it's like, oh, you have this name deck. But yeah, the very first thing, same thing, is the number of amber pips. But again, it does change from set to set. So I've noticed like in the very first set, it was all about the number of amber pips, how much can it generate. That's the meta. That's what the meta was. I'll skip forward to the third set where I'm looking for specific cards or I'm looking for a specific house. I unpackage it. The first thing I'm looking at is, do I have Brobnar? If I have it, I'm probably pretty sad. If I have Saurians, like the days I got Saurian Star Alliance logos together, that was the triple threat in that set. So not to say that there was unbeatable. It's just if you get the right card pull, that's probably the best combination you could find.
It is, but at the same time, I think that even in the third set, I had opened a Brobnar once or twice, and I still think it still works to a certain extent.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I'm not trying to like just ignore Brobnar altogether. It's just the majority and just sharing the mentality at the time. So yeah, when the set first came out, it was a sad event. Well, you guys remember when we started playing the third set, and literally the first 5 seal tournaments I played in, I always picked up a Brobnar deck.
Yeah, no, I guess, yeah. I mean, and I know what you're talking about, though. I mean, the probability of getting certain houses might have a better card pool to a certain extent, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, and like it's not a universal rule. Again, you could have the odd one out, like the losing the words. But anyway, so for a sealed event, yeah, it's appraise it based off of what my deck can do, what tools it has, like you guys described, understanding the meta of that set, so that you have a better understanding of what your opponent may or may not have within their deck, and in terms of appraising your own deck, how well it fits within that meta. And lastly is the card pool itself and if taking it to the highest level is knowing, hey, you know what, the odds of having a double um, too much to protect is fairly low. Like, not to say it's not possible, since in a sealed environment, that's what I faced up against. I wasn't
Yeah, it is.
expecting it.
It's an uncommon. So
Exactly.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I got hit with a double whammy, but hey, those are the when you play by the odds, that's what happens, right? So that's how I praise this from a seal perspective, and yeah.
Okay. So if we go into if you're playing, say now, on the Crucible Online, most of the time I think I mean, you have the sealed option, but a lot of people most likely play it as an Archon option where you bring your own deck. So in an Archon environment, you are allowed to look at the opponent's deck list. Um, does anything change here? Where, I mean, of course, you know the pip counts, what cards are in your deck in an Archon environment because you're bringing that to the to the tournament or the gameplay. So, what's one thing that you guys look for in terms of an Archon environment? For myself, I'm a big proponent of this. I've been screaming at these guys since second set is artifact control. For me, it's like make sure that whether or not the opponent has artifact control, and of course being able to have a artifact control piece, right? Because I don't know, maybe the decks that I play, I have artifacts that are pretty substantial generally, and if I see that there is no artifact control, I feel like it's open season for me. Once I get that one piece of artifact out, it's like, oh man, if you don't have anything to counter that, I'm going to town. So is there, what do you guys do in terms of an Archon experience in terms of evaluation? Is there something that's key for you guys? Dennis?
No, I mentioned it like earlier in the podcast, but what I look for when I'm looking for that 2-minute Archon exchange evaluation of opponent's deck is I look for what card or what combo is my opponent's deck gonna mess me up with. Example, Odak. Is Odak gonna come out? Is it gonna come out at the right time? Is it gonna come out at the wrong time for me to be able to run my deck? Because it like when I know most of the time when I bring an Archon deck, I know how it runs, I know its weaknesses, I know what it can do.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm exchanging a Archon card list with my opponent, it's like, how is my opponent gonna mess me up? A lot of the times, there's just 1 or 2 cards would mess me up, and if I don't see those cards at all, I just go to town. Like, I just rush, I generate Amber, or I set you up to generate Amber so I can steal it. Stuff like that. The card pool to look at is pretty tough to memorize. There's a lot of cards. There's a lot of things that can happen. But literally also the second layer, that's what is the opponent's deck trying to do. Let's say if the opponent's deck is running, how do I counter that? For example, let's say if the opponent's deck wants to bum rush pips. How do I counter it? But if the opponent has a board control deck, how do I counter it? Do I hang on to my wipe or not? Stuff like that.
Okay. So you're mainly trying to understand what the opponent's deck's trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Okay. And possibly what your possible responses are in gameplay wise before you even start.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cool. Josh, how about you? You're just looking for creatures again, or what do you usually do for in an Archon environment, or is it the same as you mentioned before?
Yeah, to summarize, in an Archon environment, it's fairly simple. So I bring a deck that I'm extremely familiar with, obviously, and then I understand my win condition, and then I look at my opponent's deck list and see what are the key cards that could prevent me from that win condition. In addition to that, I look at their win condition. I try to identify what cards or what type of game my opponent wants to play. Is it the Amber Rush game? Is it the Amber Control game? Is it the Build a Board and Reap to Victory game? Is it the Control game, right? And I look for key cards that are a threat to me, but as I'm internalizing the list, I start to understand what key cards I have that could be a threat to him. And that ultimately determines, or her, and that ultimately determines whether I hold on to certain cards or not, right? Like, for example, too much to protect, or for example, Axiom of Grisk, board wipes, steals. These are the things that, you know, my opponent's deck list isn't necessarily going to change my playstyle. It's more going to decide whether I hold on to certain cards, as opposed to actually playing them. Because I'm a very responsive, impulsive player. I react to what I see, and then I capitalize on being able to react successfully. Right.
So more of a tactical player, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Got
Exactly.
it. Cool. Anything to add, Benson? Or are you in the same boat?
Yeah, in the same boat. I don't think I could have said anything else or anything better than what's already been said.
Okay. Yeah, so it seems like everyone's once you get into the game, I guess for the sealed environment, you know, it's a little easier just to play. And then I think in the Archon environment, where you should be a little more familiar with the game, I think it seems like card knowledge or card pool knowledge is a very big factor in that. So it can help you identify what the cards are and possible modes of play. And of course, you know, Keyforge, there's so many cards. It's difficult to understand all the different modes of play, but at least you can hone in on some key cards and basically use that to your advantage. That's the general kind of vibe that I'm kind of hearing from all of us here. So, I mean, there are multiple ways to play Keyforge, and what we've mentioned are just some of the very basics. Hopefully, in a future episode, we'll go dive deeper into these discussions and possibly even start identifying different houses and possibly how you guys can understand each different house. You know, you did mention, or some of our guys mentioned that, like, oh, there might be a house combo or something, right? And knowing, like, you know, Benson's playstyle where he loves Untamed, he loves the rush, right? Or if you go get a deck with shadows, you might understand that your idea might be to kind of steal or mess with people. So hopefully we have more episodes are coming down the road. Any of you guys want to have any shout outs or anything in terms of Keyforge or anything upcoming for the week so far?
I'm recording. I might be actually recording a deck that I sold to someone in Sweden, and he actually has a tournament, and he's entering that deck into a tournament this Sunday, which is October. What is that? Like October 16, 17? Unsure.
Okay, something like that. Okay,
Yeah,
so
something like
sometime in
that.
October, mid-October, yeah.
Yeah. So, it'll be on YouTube, so it'll have its permanence. Feel free to check it out. Yeah.
Awesome. And you guys, I hear Dennis, you're doing some sort of like deck opening something coming up. Is that what you're planning to do soon?
I'm still waiting to buy some decks. So
True,
I'll
the
try to
supply
s-
shortage, right? Yeah.
yeah. But I'm just gonna stream, try to look for decks, evaluate the usual stuff, trying to see if there's any good stuff that I can have. Um, like I mentioned before, because of the shift of the meta, I'm trying to cover my whole bases to see whether or not there's a deck that transcends all four sets. So something like that. Just trying to look
Mhm.
for that. Gonna be tough, but we'll see.
Okay, cool. Benson, you have anything upcoming or for Keyforge at all?
Potentially. That one display box that I have is still sitting right there behind me. So I might do some unboxing stuff as well, just for fun. Again, things are in the works. Nothing to really talk about yet.
Okay, awesome. So it sounds like all our listeners are gonna have a bunch of content coming through, or at least something for them to check out until you guys tune in for our next episode of Keys to ESP. So once again, this is John, Benson, Dennis, and Josh. We're
Josh.
we're ESP or Team ESP here, and we want to thank you for listening to our podcast, our second episode, Keys to ESP. If you would like to get in touch with us, feel free to email us at extrashards@gmail.com. We welcome all communication to us. If you have any questions about any of us, general Keyforge questions, topics, or just want to say hi, we welcome you know, you guys reaching out to us just to say hi. So until then, this is John, and happy forging, everybody.
Bye, guys. Happy forging.
Happy forging.
See ya.